Hi, my name is Mark Salisbury, and I'm here to introduce the first of, actually the first two panels of the three today. There's lots of people here, so I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves, starting with you down the end.
I'm Diego Baldenweg. I work together with my siblings. We are from in the land of saints and sinners.
Sister Nora Baldenweg, and like he said, same film. And we're a trio of Swiss Australian siblings.
My name is Lionel, and yeah.
Hi, my name is Jerskin Fendrix. I worked on the films Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness by Yorgos Lanthimos.
Hello, I'm Anthony Willis, and I'm here with Saltburn. I've also been here just once before with Promise Young Woman, and I also did the score for Megan.
Umberto, coming from Rome, Italy, and I'm here for nominated for the film comedy La Guerra dei Nonni.
And this is Elise, his daughter.
I'm his daughter, actually. I'm just a translator, so nice to meet you all.
Welcome, everyone. I'm always fascinated how people get into film composing, because there's never one route. People start off with many different routes. So how did you three get into this world?
We were a band together with our dad and our mum during our teenage years. We played punk music with a bit of blues, and at some point our parents moved back to Australia, and we just said we want to keep being a band, but we don't really want to be on stage anymore, so we became composers.
And in terms of film composing, was that ever an aspiration?
Well, it's sort of funny because for us, we sort of slipped into that role of becoming a film composer. I think we didn't even know film composing for a very long time. We did classical music. We did music that we wanted to sell to A&Rs, us being a band, and everybody sort of thought the music is very visual, and we started getting to know different people, music supervisors wanting to play some music into ads, and slowly it sort of grew onto us that our music can actually work in media, especially our music.
We also didn't study music, so really kind of grew into it with what we were doing.
And the band was called, or is called?
It was called Trash Bag. When you're a family, you just throw it all in there.
But I think the funny thing about us being called Trash Bag is because we come from a heritage of working with instruments that don't really make sense as being instruments. Our dad, he was a pioneer in the 70s, playing on trash instruments, and he combined that with real instruments. And as we were a family and had to sort of find common ground, I think the trash instrument sort of just made sense. We wanted to put in the punk because we loved punk at that time. It has evolved, but and our dad, he's a blues musician, so we had to sort of find a way how to combine different ideas and make it work as a family. And in the end, that's how we still proceed nowadays, sort of merging different individualities of us, and at the same time different tastes, and we try and make it work that we can all agree up on something in the end.
And was your mum not in the band as well?
She was. She's actually an artist, but she had to learn the bass for our band.
Had to, I like it. Jerskin, your route into film composing.
I released an album in 2020 called Winterizer, which is 10 pop songs, and then I got an email about a year later from a director called Yorgos Lanthimos, who'd listened to the album and asked if I would be happy to score a film for him.
And at that point, had you thought about scoring movies? Was there anything in your brain?
I mean, I'd always done music stuff and had written a lot of music in different capacities since I was quite young. And I think I'd probably at one point or another toyed with the idea of doing film music because it seemed very interesting and very different to other things I was doing, which was, composing stuff. I did kind of an experimental opera with a few friends of mine from university, and I was involved with some bands, and was writing pop songs and through that kind of medium. So it was a very different thing from all of that in some ways, to be kind of furnishing this sort of work that involves so many more moving parts and is such a kind of complete integration of so many mediums. But I wasn't actively trying to do it. I was caught very by surprise when I was asked to do it, and yeah, then I tried to do it.
We'll get to that in a second. Anthony, what about you?
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing Jerskin and the Baldenweg story of sort of falling into these things, and it reminds me of actually how as composers we have these wishes of what we want to do, but the universe has such bigger plans. It's how you ultimately get into something, and it's very hard to craft your own path. For me, it was I took a more traditional route of assisting and apprenticing, being an apprentice to other composers and writing additional music. And so I moved to LA, where there's kind of more of a tradition to that. That I guess it used to be what an orchestrator did, and then when Hans Zimmer standardized, sample demos, those roles got turned into additional music composer roles, and that was, for that to happen, you need, I think, enough composers with enough big movies with enough volume that kind of workflow makes sense. So I moved to LA to do that, and was really lucky to eventually, get a really great working relationship with John Powell, Henry Jackman, and Harry Gregson Williams was also an early mentor. So it was really, I found, at least at the time in London, things were quite closed and quite small. In LA, if you were willing to work hard and you had potential, it was much more open. And so that was my path. But of course, turning that into a career in itself takes quite a lot of work. And I started doing very, very small films that, nobody would have ever heard of, just alongside my additional music writing. And, through the additional music writing, just got really so lucky to have, experiences with big directors, where, you're not the lead composer, but you're getting to learn from the problems that come up, the approaches that the lead composer takes. So it was a really awesome training, and I guess in some way, even though my own career has moved away from some of the sort of family movies that I was helping on, there was still so many things that I learned, from that time. So yeah, and then ultimately, to where I am today.
But being a composer is something you always wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was a chorister in Windsor, and that's where I was really fortunate to have an amazing musical training. And I when I left, I suppose, I don't know if it was just suddenly I went from doing loads and loads of music to doing very little music, relatively, and I'd just been singing all this wonderful music, and I suppose the desire to start writing music came from that, of like, well, I need to kind of keep this in my life. And a teacher did say to me, oh, have you ever thought about doing film music? Because your music sort of sounds sort of like that. And that was the sort of first thing that put the idea in my head. And then I did sort of actively pursue it. But, in those days, you'd lucky, remember there was a website called, I think it was scoringsessions.com, and somebody would post like a photo of Harry Gregson Williams in his, in the parking lot of Remote Control, and that was about as much information as there was about what was happening in Hollywood. It was like, now we're so sort of all collectively spoiled with this very open, lots of YouTube videos and people being very open with their process. It's really changed. But yeah, I sort of figured out that going to LA was sort of a way into it. And, it's so interesting, sort of thing compared to Jerskin, who, didn't seek that and wrote an amazing album that one of the top directors in the world, went straight after him. It's very, very different path.
Thank you. Umberto, what about you? Did you always want to be a film composer?
Oh yes, yes, yes. It was my dream since when I was very, very young. I was born in a family of musicians. My father and my grandfather were musicians, and then my father played in the National Rhythmic Orchestra of the television, and he taught many students at home. Yeah, and sometimes my home felt like a conservatory, and there is a precious moment I remember. I'm talking about 50 years ago, probably more, and my father wasn't at home because of work, and my mother turned off the television, and like a magic moment, I saw him in television. I think that this moment is what sparked, yes, in me my passion of music. Yes.
And music for film, how did that happen?
Music for film, I began with the documentaries, a lot of documentaries. I know I have the pleasure to work with a big conductor, and it's very. This memory is very funny because he makes a lot of documentaries for nature, pets, and when I was in his studio, he has the studio at home, and he has sorry for my English. My parents tried to enroll me in a school of English when I was very young, but I prefer play the piano, and this is the reason, because my English is not perfect. But my daughter here, she helped me if I need. And we was in his studio, and he has a lot of pets around the studio. So, and a cat, a fish, but parrots flying in the studio. And I work with him there, and I was worried to protect my laptop for eventual problems arriving from the sky. It was a very, very interesting experience, because I think documentary is a good school. I teach in conservatory in Rome, Santa Cecilia, where I studied. And is a good school for begin, for imagine, and music. Cinema arrived later.
So we're going to show some clips and then talk about the films in question. So can we have the first one, please, which is from In the Land of Saints and Sinners? So how did you get involved with this sort of Irish crime film? And am I mistaken, or is there a bit of Morricone in there as well?
Morricone's not around anymore. No. We had a chance to meet Rob Lawrence way before the film was really set to happen, and we had a great talk. And he had we also talked about the problem of temp music, and he remembered that when his film got greenlit, he said, I felt really comfortable talking to these three guys, and I want to start straight off on script level. So we entered this project on the script level, which gave us complete freedom, and we were required to compose themes. So he said it's a very theme-based film, and that's how the whole thing started in a way.
And I think it was also cool he was quite open for suggestions right at the start, and us reading the script was pretty easy detectable that there's an Irish note to it, there's a Western note to it, and it all plays in the 70s. And the easiest thing is to say, well, how about we combine all of these elements, but to really make it work and not make it sound like stereotypical music was sort of the challenge in the end. And we did a lot of research into Irish music at the start. So what we presented him was piano themes. We sent him about 20 themes, and they were all in the harmonies of Celtic music. And we tried to use the rules, but break sort of the typical sound of how Irish music is played. So not that we fall into that maudlin trap, so to say. And in the end, from the 20 themes, he liked about 3 really much, and then we started painting textures, and in the textures to these themes, we found the blues harp to really make sense. And while discussing this idea with the director, he also said that he used to play the blues harp, so it was sort of a really nice thing that he could bond with, and we could, because at the start when we showed a few things, he only wanted to play some a harmonica track right at the end, and we said that's going to be like really kitschy if we only use it at the end, and we said if we want to really use that there and keep it strong, we have to sort of slowly build it into the fabrics of the whole movie, and he said, well, give it a try. If I like it, we're gonna take it. So we invited our dad to come and play the blues harp. I mean, we orchestrated pretty much everything, and then we told him, please follow this melody line, please play this rhythm, and we started swapping things out like a puzzle, where we said, now that the blues harp's much cooler than the orchestra rhythm, let's replace it with long notes, for example. And I think it was a long process of really trying things out, which was fun.
There were also lots of, there were lots of nighttime sessions with our dad to try and find ways to play the blues harp or the harmonica in different ways. And so he really got crazy into sometimes just breathing into the harmonica, or just making sounds with it using broken harmonicas, so that we were looking, obviously it was the idea to look for that, what, like you were saying, something that reminds you of a Western, but without it feeling like the typical Western. But so it became, the harmonica, the use of it became almost like a character, kind of the inner voice of Liam Neeson, who plays the main role.
I was going to say you wrote the themes at script stage? So you wrote all the music before he shot the film, or afterward?
Well, we wrote a lot of the themes. The themes, they were all established in the script phase. But I mean, as an edit evolves, you start developing the rhythm, the structures, and the speed of the music. But the themes, they were really from the start. They were sort of placed. So we knew that there has to be a theme for Liam Neeson, Finbar, evolving throughout the movie. We need a general movie theme. We need a bad guys antagonist theme, and they were pretty clear right from the start.
And also actually very much led the way then how it was filmed and how how it was put together.
Thank you. Jerskin, you had a sort of similar situation, I think, in that Yorgos called you and then he gave you the script and concept notes before he'd shot, and then you had to compose the music. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is true. I think, I don't know, a lot of people seem to, it's a theme that people are surprised at writing the music before the film started being shot, but actually I've heard a lot of people, I think it's actually surprisingly quite common. Especially if you have like already a good relationship with your directors, that you guys obviously did, or knew him before. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. It's really nice to have a system where you're not kind of settled into like 6 weeks after picture lock, and then you have to kind of like really try and drill it in as quickly as possible without much time to like properly dream of what might be a more interesting approach musically. Also, just having the freedom of, basically it depends how people are inspired, if it's the words or the images or researching outside of it, or some people might like looking at similar or different musics for that kind of area. But then you can just write pieces as if it was, as if it was going to be presented at a concert or as an album or something, and you're not constricted by having to represent such a wide gamut of emotion, and then also with the proviso that it's exactly 32 seconds long or something stupid like that, and then it's quite easy to kind of butcher it and chop it down later on rather than having to retroactively do that. So at least for me so far, I found it to be a really good approach, and it's very freeing, and also it means that you're necessarily brought on a lot earlier, which means that the time constraint doesn't pummel you as much. I'm generally a very slow person, and I think I wouldn't really be able to do a film if I had, you know, less than the amount of time than I've been lucky to have so far. It's the most fun part, I think, you know, working out the concept for how you're going to use the music to actually, you know, bring something to the film rather than just parroting something. What, like the orchestration, the approach to recording, the approach to the mixing, like how you might use themes or not use themes. That, like, all of this stuff is where the soul of it really gets created. And then by the time you get to the film actually being pieced together and picture lock and so on, then, you know, you can get technical with it, and it requires a certain amount of technique, which is probably what sets film music apart from lots of other musical mediums. But yeah, the soul of it really requires, I think, a lot more space, both time-wise and also in terms of just freedom of thought.
So how much music did you write initially, and did they play on set?
Yeah, I think there were about maybe 3 or 4 months where I spent most of the month kind of trying to think really hard about how I was going to approach it, making stuff, and then I would say maybe a really high percentage of the music I wrote got into the film, actually. I also didn't know how film music worked particularly, and I assumed that I would come up with a demo and send it to Yorgos, the director, and he would be, you know, he would think, oh, like, that's a nice melody, maybe let's try with some different instruments, or maybe we'll, you know, extend this or put this here. And he just kind of said, yeah, that's great, that's going in the film, and that was it. And I wasn't allowed to change it. And if I was aware that that was going to happen, I probably would have done a better job with the demos. So a lot of the final, because we did attempt to re-record a great deal of it, and then it sounded nicer in some ways, but it really, the emotion and the honesty of it had got lost very quickly in those later recordings. So a lot of the stuff that's in the film actually was just me playing the violin, you know, on a shitty microphone in my bedroom or in my studio. So yeah, no, a lot of stuff from the early things I was just sending back and forth with Yorgos ended up being in the film. He used a lot of the music on set. I mean, the sets as well. I was really lucky that I got to go and see all of the sets, which had all been built from scratch. And, you know, having seen the concept artwork, the sets for Poor Things were really extraordinary. And I think when I got back from that trip, I thought, like, oh God, I actually have to really, you know, I got to come up with some more good stuff. Actually, everyone's kind of out, you know, working at a lot higher standard than I am. So I did write some stuff after I saw the set as well, which I was really inspired by.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to look at another clip. This is from Umberto's work. It's a sort of compilation with a little bit of the film you're nominated for at the end. So if you can run that clip, please. La guerra dei nonni? War.
The war of the grandfather.
Yes. So tell me about that movie, the approach to it. Had you worked with a filmmaker before? How, you know?
Yes, I just worked with this director. He was a writer. Yeah, the other film that I make, for which I make music. So he just know well my music, and he called me for 2 films, this and another, and it's lovely work with him because he says, okay, you can work, you do what you want. But after he comes, listen, we talk about some moments, and it's very, very nice. But the problem that we write always on the script, yes, is in Italy too, because we have not too much time when arrive the Imagine. Yeah, now I'm working to a new film and I'm running because in December is in cinema. But interesting is that sometimes happened that I write some music for a film before the Imagine, and I write music by an idea. This theme is nice. I make a valser for with this theme too, and happened that that music generate the idea for the director to make a new scene for the film. Yeah, it's una bella soddisfazione. It's a great satisfaction for a musician. I suppose.
So in this case, you wrote it from the script, or you wrote it from seeing the film once you shot it?
Sure. Yes. A lot. Yes. And there was in one film, biggest success in Italy. There was I wrote this waltz for. On that theme, and the director, I think a new scene for this film, and he makes a scene very costosa, rich, that need a lot of money for the production, not for your life, because a cast, 100 actors, and the production called me, stop next time, not right before, because it's too much expensive for us.
Cool. Before we do the next clip, I actually wanted to ask you something earlier, Jerskin, about Kinds of Kindness. Did you have the same situation that you wrote from the script, or did you actually get to do it to the film?
Yeah, Kinds of Kindness was a weird film because the post-production process for Poor Things took a very long time. There was a great deal of CGI to work out, and it just happened to be a very protracted one. So Yorgos decided he wanted to make another film in the meantime, which so it was pre-production was very quick, and I had to write and record all of that while still doing the Poor Things work. So I think the entire score was done over about a month from writing it to recording and mixing it, which was very different. But I knew about the film in advance. He had talked about it a great deal. We talked about using very, very sparse kind of piano and choir to kind of offset what was a very eclectic orchestration for Poor Things, and also the libretto was really important. One of the screenwriters, Efthimos, who'd worked with Yorgos on his earlier Greek language films, wrote a number of poems kind of abstractly based on these themes around the three films that Kinds of Kindness is made of, and then all of the choral pieces were these a cappella settings of these poems, basically. So it was that restriction was quite different, the timing was quite different, and also just the nature of the film felt... I think it's wonderful. I think it's a lot more difficult film to watch than Poor Things. A lot of it oddly felt almost kind of like an exercise in filmmaking. I think the way in which it was shot and conceived, and that it was a lot more cerebral approach, I think, in a lot of ways to filmmaking compared to Poor Things. That was a lot more like really, really emotionally led.
Cool, thank you. We're going to look at the final clip, which is from Anthony's work on Saltburn, and it actually is a clip that we can. We haven't got one.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, Anthony, it's your second collaboration with Emerald for now. So how did that come about, and then what was the approach to this movie?
So yeah, I was sort of talking a little bit about working as an additional music composer, and sort of that challenge of transitioning into other films. And actually John Powell had a couple of things happen that were really important. John Powell had recommended me to do a How to Train Your Dragon holiday special, and so for the first time I'd worked on actually that's not quite true. Before that I'd done a silent movie for Universal. They had all these silent movies that they were restoring, and they thought, this is a great chance to test these young composers out and give them very little money to score 70 minutes non-stop music for a movie that was made 100 years ago, where anyone desperate enough to actually get a gig wouldn't want to just do it with samples. So I spent another $10,000 of my own money doing this thing wall to wall. So I think this was important, because then when the How to Train Your Dragon special came along, I think Universal felt they really had to give me the gig. And as a result, I'd worked closely with the music team there at exactly the time that Emerald was looking for a composer, and it couldn't be a more different project than Promised Young Woman, which was Emerald's directorial debut. But what was important about it, and I'd got to know Emerald in LA a little bit, and she knew that she knew that I'd done a lot of additional music on these kind of quite traditional thematic scores. And she's she's the coolest old soul I could imagine, in that she is the coolest person you'll ever meet, but she's also really loves the history of cinema and film scoring, and and themes, and having narrative music as opposed to music that's too centered on just timbre, which she also really likes. And so I think she was just kind of curious, well, what would Anthony do with Promised Young Woman, having frankly had no business doing anything quite like that, but what would how would his brain wrap his head around this movie? So I wrote some demos, and I think the temperature would have been so different around me had I not just worked with Universal, who were supervising Promised Young Woman, because it was a Focus Features movie. And rather than the phone call from the music supervisor, Sue Jacobs, who was amazing, being, well, this guy's, what's he done? It was, oh yeah, no, we love Anthony. We just work with him. It was great. And I think that's really important for your career, of having people that are just general supporters of you, that you're polite and that you show up and you deliver, and things that actually have nothing to do with you as an artist and what you can deliver, which is even more important. But that was a crucial thing for me. And what was also crucial is my agent at the time, Sarah Kovacs, was like, I told her about the movie, and I was like, yeah, Emerald, she just wants sort of advice. And Sarah, to her credit, was really like, no, let's keep going. You could get, we think you should do this. So that was really important. And, sort of having that kind of eye in the sky, and her seeing what that kind of relationship could look like. So I wrote these demos that, Emerald really liked. And I think I'd written so many demos before that had never even probably got into the right hands. That, like, you hear about a friend making a movie, or loosely involved in a movie, or producing a movie or something, and you think, oh, if I write the best piece of music ever, maybe I'll get hired. But there's so many other things about the kind of the idea of you doing the movie that will come into play. If they're eyeing up James Newton Howard, it's going to be really hard to sort of cut into that league, even if you write a piece that's absolutely perfect for the movie. And this was one of those that it just came together. And I think, I used the thematic experience I'd gained under John to sort of just know how to go about writing something away from picture. Although I did watch the movie, Promised Young Woman, I watched it and kind of lived with it for a day, and then wrote a theme and wrote a load of variations on it, showing how we could use it in different ways. And anyway, so that's how my relationship with Emerald started, and it's just been so fun, and I, it's allowed me to discover a part of myself that I didn't sort of know was there, which I think is really cool about working in film music. We if left to our own devices and asked what kind of music we'd write, I mean, well, these guys are clever enough to be able to write music without films, but I think it's really cool to have a film to be inspired by and react to, and obviously then that led to Saltburn. So
with Saltburn, at which stage did you come on?
Saltburn, I started to do the film opens with a reimagining of the Zadok the Priest intro, which I started. Emerald said, "Yeah, I really like this piece," and I'd sung it a lot as a chorister, and I really liked it as well. But she sort of said, "How can we use this in a dark way?" So I started experimenting with this idea of a slightly more contemporary string arrangement with, with the staggered arpeggio. So the second violin stagger the first, and you get a slightly more interesting blur, which is my way of trying to be trendy. And that was the first thing, but I didn't until I actually saw the film and I saw the photography and I saw the performances, I didn't know quite how to use it. It was a thing that was existing in her head, but my early experiment, I did get something really important from that, which was just a sense of how could I fiddle with the harmony, how could I get the arrangement. The idea of putting it in 6/4 was already kind of baked into that. I liked that more spacious feel and the slower tempo of it, and so it was really important. And actually, I'm in Emerald's next film, I'm looking to dive way deeper into that, having worked with her more. Promising Young Woman was such a different film, and I'm really kind of looking to do more of that, because I think even if you have 3 interesting things that you can then bring to the director's cut, that is worth its weight in gold. So sometimes we don't need much, but we want the materials we're building our scores from to have something about them that just has a different energy than maybe what you've done before or what other people have done before. Just something that feels special for the film. So, and it's really hard to find that.
Does she make suggestions? You say she's big on film music.
Very much, yeah. She loved the idea of organ in Saltburn. She loved the idea in that cue of solo voice. She had really good ideas, throughout. And I think I said that in my talk this morning, of there's sometimes this feeling of the composer, being the hero and coming in and having the perfect solution for the score, sort of on day one, and knowing that that's actually, with most directors, very unlikely. Without them, they're the absolute key to the puzzle, but bringing them enough that they can react to, and then then they can kind of put it through their lens. And the way we did that scene that we just watched, was very much Emerald sort of saying, I think it should be, it needs that feeling you wake up in the morning and something's wrong, but we also want this sort of lost romantic sort of almost this kind of dead hope in it. It's constantly rising. And that was very much, initially she said, let's just make it like a horror cue. And then, we found that kind of middle ground with like a little bit of spicy timbre in the strings, but actually the heart of it is quite emotional.
Cool. Thank you very much. Before we go, I'm going to ask what you're all working on next. Is it more trash bag music? Is it another film? What can we expect next from you?
The band is our heritage, and we keep up that spirit in the way we collaborate. But we're working on a feature film with the late Michel Blanc in the main role, which just died, I think, 3-4 weeks ago. So that should be out next year.
And how do the 3 of you collaborate? Siblings, is there love? Is there animosity? How does it, friction, how does it work?
You need a panel for that.
Yeah, I guess it's the 3 of us are all very different, and it's I think through the 20 years of working in film music and 10 years as a band before, we've all learnt what we're good at and what we're not good at. And I think it's embracing that and then discussing a lot, being very open with each other, where we're all very direct with each other, and trying to push each other to, I think when you work as a family, there's no like hierarchical problems really, so everyone's fighting for the best, and if 2 of us don't like something, the third one will be, well, there must be a reason, and we have to keep finding, keep looking, keep going. And it's, for us, a lot of our work is just kind of being together and figuring out. I think if all of us would do a very different style if we were alone.
Yeah. I think because we've been doing this for so long, we've been forced to find solutions together. And I think that's sort of something that has come in quite handy. If we work with a director, we sort of know that if there's a different thought about something, we sort of know how to approach it without losing the content, so to say. And we're not just going to compromise and do whatever he says. We're gonna try and find ways to argue, to make something happen, and we're all open for change. And I think that's something that's been helpful throughout.
And Jerskin, you are doing Yorgos's next film. Is there anything beyond that? Is it back to the music, the pop music, or working with other directors?
Yeah, so we're halfway-ish through the next film that Yorgos has done called Begonia. Incidentally, I've not actually been allowed to see the script for that, so it's been a bit of a different working method.
So how are you? How is that approach for you then? I mean, is it just conversations with him? I mean, how?
No, he doesn't. No.
You would just come up with music from.
It'll make sense next year. And yeah, so I'm doing that. There are some other film things maybe, but I can't really. And I'm also releasing another album of songs, which I've been working on for quite a few years, next year as well. Yeah, that's basically it at the moment.
Anthony, you mentioned Emerald's next film, which is Wuthering Heist. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't signed enough paper to really say anything officially, but yeah, hopefully that's in the works. And equally another film in the Megan universe. So very excited for those.
And how is it scoring horror compared to, mind you, Saltburn's got a lot of horror in.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting area. I think it's really hard to do. I mean, this particular film, the particular upcoming films are more in a. I think the Megan one is much more in the kind of thriller noir sort of area. So I think it's I have so much admiration for composers that are really good at horror, and I think it's really hard to do it like really well originally, and some people do. I mean, it's not so much my strength, I think, but yeah, I mean, it's so cool that Megan itself was really popular and well received.
Thank you. And Umberto, what's next for you?
Next film, I'm working to a comedy, Italian comedy, with the two most famous actors Italian that stay together in this film, and the director is a famous director with who I make about 10 films. And one was the Benvenuti al Sud. It was a famous remake of a French film, Bienvenue chez les Ch'tis. And I make the music for the Italian version, was a box office success. And this film is very, very, very nice, and the director needs a lot of music. He loves always change, new, no another new. So comedy is difficult. We know that comedy is difficult because you have to write swing, pop songs, symphonic. And this director is the first for this reason, because he loves. I use usually the same team in different style, of course, but he loves don't listen always the same team. So I need to write a lot of music, new music, but it's interesting. It's a good job. I love working with him because I work to a lot of films with him.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up now. Please put your hands together for Diego, Nora, Daniel, Jerskin, Anthony, Umberto, and Alicia. And good luck tonight.